Welcome back to budget-friendly TCG and CCG, everyone. Hitting episode 4 already. Can you believe it? For those just joining us, welcome aboard. We're all about exploring the awesome world of trading card games without emptying your wallet, of course. And, of course, a big shout out to our loyal listeners. You're the reason we keep diving deep into these amazing games. Before we get started, if you're enjoying the show, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to stay updated on all things budget-friendly TCGs.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Now, today we're tackling two heavy hitters in the digital TCG world: the legendary Magic, The Gathering, and the up-and-comer, Legends of Elysium. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a solid understanding of which game might be the perfect fit for your playstyle, and, importantly, your budget.
And to help kick things off, especially if you're new to the TCG scene, we've got 3 quick tips to get you started without breaking the bank.
All right. Tip number 1. Take full advantage of free-to-play features. Both MTG Arena and Legends of Elysium have awesome free-to-play options, so you can dive right in, learn the ropes, and even start building your collection without spending a dime. Think of it as a test drive before you commit.
That's a great point. The free-to-play model really opens the door for anyone to experience these games without any financial barriers.
Tip number 2. Tap into the power of the community. TCG communities are some of the most passionate and helpful out there. Online forums, social media groups, and even your local game store are teeming with players eager to share tips, trade cards, and help you build budget-friendly decks. It's like having a built-in support system for your TCG journey.
Absolutely. Those communities can be a goldmine of information. They can help you discover hidden gems in the card pool, stay up to date on the latest strategies, and find affordable ways to expand your collection.
And finally, tip number 3. Start with starter decks. These pre-constructed decks are designed to be balanced, easy to learn, and super budget-friendly. They're the perfect way to get a feel for the game's mechanics and dip your toes into casual matches without having to invest a ton of time and money building a custom deck right away.
Starter decks are a fantastic stepping stone, and they can even be surprisingly competitive in casual settings.
All right, with those budget-friendly tips in mind, let's shift gears and dive into our main event, Magic. The Gathering versus Legends of Elysium.
It's really a clash of titans, MTG, with its decades of history and intricate mechanics, versus Loe, a newcomer pushing the boundaries of what a digital TCG can be.
So, let's start with the OG.
Yeah.
Magic, The Gathering. I mean, it's basically the king of TCGs.
Right.
Decades of captivating players with its deep strategy, endless deck-building possibilities, and a lore that's richer than a dragon's hoard.
It's a game that truly rewards mastery. There's so much depth in its card interactions, the 5 colors of mana, and a constantly evolving metagame that keeps players on their toes.
And if you're looking for a digital version that doesn't skimp on the MTG experience, MTG Arena is where it's at. You get the free-to-play goodness, regular updates that mirror the latest physical card sets, and different formats to suit your playstyle and budget.
MTG Arena has been a game changer in terms of accessibility. It allows players to experience the full depth and complexity of Magic without having to invest in a physical card collection, which can get pretty pricey.
Now, let's switch lanes and talk about Legends of Elysium. This newer TCG is turning heads with its blend of classic card mechanics and a twist that throws a whole new strategic layer into the mix, a hex-based board system.
This is where Loe really sets itself apart. It's not just about playing cards, it's about positioning your units on a hexagonal battlefield, terraforming the land, and controlling key locations to gain an advantage. Think of it as a fusion of traditional TCGs and strategy board games.
Okay, so it's like you're playing cards on a game board similar to Settlers of Catan. That sounds like it adds a whole new dimension to the strategy.
Yeah, exactly. You're not just managing your hand and resources, you're actively shaping the battlefield, creating favorable positions, and maneuvering your units for strategic control. And you're right, the terrain itself isn't just for show. Certain hexes offer bonuses to specific unit types, or grant special abilities.
Wow, so controlling those strategic locations could really swing the momentum of a match. It's fascinating how Loe combines those board control elements with traditional card play.
It creates a truly unique and engaging experience, and it's a major difference that sets it apart from MTG, which primarily focuses on card-to-card interactions.
So, we've got a classic titan versus an innovative challenger, both offering free-to-play options and unique gameplay experiences. But how do they stack up when it comes to the nitty-gritty details like strategy, depth, and that all-important concept of ownership in a digital world? Well, for that, we'll need to dive a little deeper.
And that's exactly what we'll be doing in the next segment. We'll dissect the strategic nuances of both games, explore their approaches to ownership in the digital age, and help you figure out which one might be the perfect match for your gaming style. All right, let's get down to the strategic heart of these games. You've got to know what you're getting into, right?
Totally. So MTG is famous for its strategic depth. It's got a massive card pool, tons of different formats, and that ever-evolving metagame that keeps things fresh and challenging. It's no wonder it's considered the king of TCG strategy.
It's like a game of chess, but with fireballs and goblins.
Oh, wow.
Mastering card synergies, predicting your opponent's moves, and adapting to the constantly shifting landscape of the game, that's what makes MTG so compelling.
Yeah, it's not just about playing the cards you have, it's about playing the right cards at the right time, knowing when to bluff, when to hold back, and when to unleash that killer combo.
Exactly. But don't think for a second that Legends of Elysium is a strategic lightweight. It's got its own unique blend of card play and board control that creates a whole new set of challenges.
So you're saying it's not just about what cards you play, but where you play them on that hex-based board that adds a whole other layer of strategy to think about.
Absolutely. You need to consider terrain advantages, unit positioning, and how those elements interact with your overall strategy. Plus, Lowy has this cool dual resource system where you're managing both mana and land.
Okay, so it's not just about having enough mana to play your cards.
Yeah.
You also need land to deploy units and activate certain abilities. That's a fascinating twist.
Yeah.
It forces you to think even more strategically about your deck and how you're going to utilize both resources effectively.
It definitely keeps you on your toes. Now let's talk about ownership. MTG, especially with its physical cards, has always had a strong secondary market. But in MTG Arena, you're essentially renting those digital cards. You don't truly own them.
So if you decide to move on to another game, those cards essentially vanish into the digital ether. Yeah, that's kind of a bummer.
It can be, especially if you've invested time and money into building your collection now. Lowy takes a completely different approach with blockchain technology.
Okay, I've heard a lot about blockchain, but honestly, it still feels a bit like magic to me. How does it actually work in a TCG?
Think of blockchain as a digital ledger that records all transactions in a secure and transparent way in Lowy. Your cards and heroes are represented as non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. Each NFT is unique and verifiable on the blockchain, giving you true ownership and control.
So it's like each card has its own digital fingerprint that proves it's yours and yours alone. And because it's all recorded on the blockchain, it's super secure and can't be tampered with.
Exactly. This means you can trade or even sell your Lowy assets with confidence, knowing that they have real value outside of the game itself. It's a game changer for digital ownership.
That's pretty revolutionary. So we've covered gameplay strategy and ownership. But what about the overall feel of these games? How do they compare in terms of pacing, learning curve, and even their aesthetic appeal? Those things can make a big difference in whether a game clicks with you, right?
Absolutely. Let's start with pacing. MTG, especially in its competitive formats, can be a pretty complex and time-consuming game. Matches can sometimes stretch for an hour or more.
Yeah, but you're looking for a quick game to play on your lunch break, MTG might not be the best fit.
Not necessarily. MTG Arena does offer formats designed for faster matches, but overall, it's a game that rewards patience and careful planning.
Now, how does Lowy compare in terms of pacing?
Lowy tends to be a bit snappier with matches, typically wrapping up in 15 to 30 minutes. It's a good option if you prefer shorter, more dynamic games.
That sounds perfect for those times when you're craving a strategic fix but don't have hours to spare.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the learning curve. MTG, with its decades of history and complex rules, can be a bit intimidating for newcomers.
Yeah, I remember feeling completely lost when I first started playing MTG. It took a while for all those mechanics and interactions to click.
It's a game that definitely demands dedication and a willingness to learn. Lowy, on the other hand, has a gentler learning curve. The core mechanics are more intuitive, and the hex-based board system, while adding strategic depth, is also fairly easy to grasp.
So Lowy might be a more welcoming entry point for someone just dipping their toes into the TCG world.
It's definitely a more approachable option for beginners. Now let's shift gears and talk aesthetics. MTG has this classic high fantasy feel with wizards, dragons, and epic battles. The artwork is often intricate and detailed, reflecting that rich fantasy lore.
Yeah, MTG definitely has that classic fantasy novel vibe.
Lowy also embraces a fantasy setting, but it has a more vibrant, stylized aesthetic. The artwork is bold and colorful, with a focus on dynamic character designs and a world that feels familiar yet refreshingly unique.
So it's like the difference between a classic fantasy painting and a modern graphic novel. Both have their own charm, but they appeal to different tastes.
Exactly. And finally, let's not forget about the importance of community. Both MTG and Lowy have passionate fan bases, but they differ in some interesting ways.
Okay, so MTG, with its long history and established competitive scene, has a massive and diverse community. You've got everyone from casual players to seasoned pros battling it out on the global stage.
It's a community that spans generations, united by a love for the game's depth and strategic complexity.
Now, Lowy, being a newer game, has a smaller but rapidly growing community. And because it's built on blockchain technology, there's a strong emphasis on community ownership and governance.
That's right. Lowy players have a voice in shaping the future of the game. It's a collaborative effort between the developers and the players, which creates a really cool sense of shared ownership.
So it's more like a partnership than a traditional developer-player relationship that's pretty unique.
It is, and that sense of community ownership is a big draw for many Lowy players. They feel like they're not just playing a game, they're part of something bigger, something that's pushing the boundaries of what a digital TCG can be.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground: gameplay, strategy, ownership, pacing, learning curve aesthetics, and even community dynamics. Both MTG and Lowy clearly have their own strengths and unique appeal.
Absolutely, and in the next segment, we'll delve into the specific differences between MTG and Lowy when it comes to gameplay and strategic depth, really putting those elements side by side.
All right, so we've explored a ton of ground comparing MTG and Lowy from every angle, but now let's really get into the nuts and bolts of what it's actually like to play these games. What are the core gameplay differences that will make you say, this is the game for me?
Yeah, it's all about how you want to experience the thrill of a card game, right? MTG at its heart is about those classic card duels. You summon creatures, cast spells, and try to outwit your opponent to reduce their life points to 0. It's that back and forth battle of wits and strategy that's captivated players for decades.
Right, it's that classic card game duel, like a mental sparring match. You're trying to predict your opponent's moves, counter their strategies, and build up your forces to deliver that knockout blow.
Exactly, and MTG Arena captures that essence perfectly, but then you've got Legends of Elysium, which throws in a whole new dimension with its hex-based board system. It's not just about the cards you play, it's about where you play them on the board, how you maneuver your units, and how you control key locations.
Okay, so picture this. You're not just facing your opponent across a virtual table. You're on a battlefield divided into hexagons, kind of like a futuristic war room.
Yeah.
You have to think about positioning terrain advantages and how your units move across the board to gain the upper hand.
Yeah, and that terrain isn't just window dressing, it plays a huge role in the game. Certain hexes boost specific unit types or grant special abilities. Controlling these strategic locations can turn the tide of battle in your favor.
Wow, so it's like a blend of classic card play and strategic board game tactics. It sounds like Limi really amps up the strategic depth.
It definitely does. It forces you to think several moves ahead, considering not just your card synergies, but also how your units interact with the terrain and your opponent's forces. It's like playing chess with a deck of cards.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued by that. Now let's talk about how MTG and Lowy approach strategic depth within their respective systems. MTG is known for its intricate card interactions and vast card pool, right?
Yeah, it's all about mastering those synergies between cards, building decks that flow seamlessly, and anticipating your opponent's moves. It's a game that rewards deep knowledge of the cards, the different formats, and the ever-shifting metagame.
So it's like you're constantly trying to solve a strategic puzzle, figuring out the best combination of cards and tactics to outmaneuver your opponent.
Exactly, and while Lowy might have smaller card pool compared to MTG, it makes up for it with its innovative gameplay mechanics. You've got the hex-based board system, hero customization, and that intriguing dual resource system we talked about earlier.
Right, managing both mana and land adds a whole other layer of complexity to the game. You have to balance your mana needs for playing cards with your land requirements for deploying units and activating abilities.
It's a constant juggling act, and it forces you to make tough choices. Do you focus on building up your mana pool to unleash powerful spells, or do you prioritize acquiring land to expand your board presence and control key locations? Each decision has ripple effects that can impact the course of the entire match.
So in a way, both games offer a ton of strategic depth, but they approach it from different angles. MTG is more about mastering card interactions and adapting to a constantly evolving metagame, while Lowy is about blending card play with board control and resource management on a dynamic battlefield.
That's a great way to put it. It really depends on what kind of strategic challenge you're looking for.
All right, now let's revisit the concept of ownership in the digital realm, specifically how it relates to rewards. We talked about how blockchain technology gives you true ownership of your Lowy assets, but how does that actually translate into tangible rewards?
This is where the concept of play to earn comes into play in Lowy. You're not just playing for fun, you have the opportunity to earn rewards for your skill and dedication.
So it's like being rewarded for your time and effort, not just in terms of in-game progress, but also potentially in real-world value. That's a pretty radical departure from traditional gaming models.
It is by winning matches, completing quests, and participating in tournaments, you can earn Aloy tokens, the game's native cryptocurrency.
And these tokens can be exchanged for other cryptocurrencies or even converted into real-world currency. So theoretically, you could actually generate income from playing Aloy.
Exactly, and that's a game changer for many players. It transforms how we perceive the value of our gaming skills.
Now, I know some people might be wary of play-to-earn models, wondering if it's just a way for developers to exploit players. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a valid concern, and it's important to be cautious. But in Aloy's case, the play-to-earn model is built into the core of the game's design and economy. It's not about forcing players to spend money, it's about rewarding them for their engagement and skill.
So it's not a pay-to-win situation where those who spend the most money have an unfair advantage?
Not at all. Aloy is designed to be a skill-based game. Your strategic thinking, deck-building prowess, and tactical execution are what determine your success. The play-to-earn aspect simply adds an extra layer of reward for those who excel.
And because it's all built on blockchain technology, everything is transparent and verifiable. Right, players can see exactly how the system works and trust that it's fair.
Transparency is key, especially in a play-to-earn environment. Aloy's blockchain integration ensures that all transactions are recorded on a public ledger, making everything auditable and tamper-proof.
That definitely adds a layer of trust and security. Now, zooming out a bit. What do you think the long-term implications of play-to-earn models like this are for the gaming industry as a whole?
I think it has the potential to be revolutionary.
Yeah.
It creates new opportunities for players to engage with games, build communities, and even generate income. It also opens up new avenues for developers to monetize their games and engage with their communities in a more meaningful way.
It's like shifting from a traditional model where players are just consumers to a more collaborative model where they're active participants and stakeholders in the game's ecosystem.
It's an exciting shift, and Aloy is at the forefront of this movement, demonstrating the potential of blockchain technology to create a more equitable and rewarding gaming experience.
All right, so as we wrap up this epic deep dive into MTG and Aloy, I think we've given our listeners a ton to think about. Both games offer incredible depth, strategic challenges, and unique gameplay experiences.
Absolutely. And the choice of which one is right for you really comes down to personal preference. Do you crave that classic card duel experience with a massive card pool and an ever-evolving metagame? Or are you intrigued by the innovation of Aloy's hex-based board system, its play-to-earn potential, and its community-driven spirit?
I think the best way to truly know is to jump in and experience both games firsthand. And luckily, with their free-to-play options, you can do just that without breaking the bank.
Exactly. So whether you're a seasoned TCG pro or a curious newcomer, I encourage you to explore both MTG Arena and Legends of Elysium. See which one sparks your imagination, challenges your strategic mind, and fits your budget and playstyle.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of budget-friendly TCG and CCG. A huge thanks to you, our awesome listeners, for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode exploring a whole new world of card gaming possibilities.
Until then, keep those decks sharp, those strategies cunning, and those wallets happy.